Okay, I want you to picture a dinner party,
Huh.
a really exclusive one, maybe somewhere nice in Napa.
Right.
There are exactly 200 people in the room. You can hear the clinking glasses, the conversation, the whole thing.
Right.
Now, imagine that if you took the net worth of just those 200 people and you stacked it up, it would equal $2 trillion.
$2 trillion with a T. It's an incredible number.
Right. That's enough money to fund entire nations. It's enough to buy the NFL, the NBA, and probably a small space program on the side. And that is the reality in California right now. You have this tiny, tiny group of people sitting on an unimaginable mountain of gold.
It really is a staggering concentration of wealth. And just to give you a sense of the trajectory here, back in 2011, that same group held about $300 billion.
$300 billion.
Today, it's over $2 trillion. So, while the rest of the economy has had its ups and downs, the wealth in that specific room has it's exploded.
But here is the cinematic twist. Right outside the walls of that restaurant, the rest of the state is staring down the barrel of a fiscal shotgun. We aren't just talking about a budget shortfall. We are talking about a collapse.
A total collapse.
Hospitals closing, safety nets unraveling, hundreds of thousands of jobs just on the chopping block.
That is the contrast we are dealing with today. It's a tale of two Californias. On one side, historic wealth. On the other, a historic crisis. And this isn't just, a natural economic downturn. This is a man-made collision.
A collision between two pieces of paper.
Exactly. On one side, you have the federal government dropping the hammer with H.R. 1, which they've branded the One Big Beautiful Bill Act.
Which I have to say, that sounds like something a marketing intern came up with at 3 in the morning.
It certainly has a ring to it. But on the other side, rising up to meet that challenge is a California ballot initiative, the 2026 Billionaire Tax Act. It's essentially a showdown.
Federal austerity versus state-level wealth redistribution.
That's the fight.
So that is our mission today. We are going to unpack this battle. We've got the full text of the legislation. We have reports from the UC Berkeley Labor Center, analysis from the Legislative Analyst's Office, and some really interesting man-on-the-street perspectives. We are going to figure out what happens when Washington tightens the belt and California tries to pick the pockets of the ultra-wealthy to keep the lights on.
And the big question we need to answer is this actually a solution? Or are we just, slapping a very expensive gold-plated Band-Aid on a mortal wound?
Let's start with those storm clouds coming from D.C.
Mm-hmm.
It's a One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and why is it causing panic attacks in Sacramento?
So H.R. 1 is a massive recalibration of how the federal government spends money. The headline number, the one everyone's talking about, is that it cuts nearly $1 trillion from Medicaid nationally over the next decade.
Okay, $1 trillion is the number my brain can't even really process, but California runs its own version of Medicaid. It's called Medi-Cal. So I assume you're taking a proportionate hit.
A massive hit. We are looking at losing somewhere between $10 and $20 billion. Per year.
Per year.
Every single year. And I think it's important to understand that this isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. This is the money that pays for the health care of about a third of the state's entire population.
So fewer dollars flowing in means what? Doctors just don't get paid.
Doctors don't get paid, clinics start to close, services get cut. But there is a secondary effect that I think gets overlooked. The UC Berkeley Labor Center, they ran the numbers on the employment impact.
Okay.
They estimate California could lose between 109,000 and 217,000 jobs because of this bill.
Wait, hold on. 200,000 jobs?
Yeah.
That's the population of a decent-sized city. Are those all nurses and doctors?
That's the scary part. No. About a third of those job losses would be in completely different sectors. Restaurants, retail, construction.
How does cutting Medicaid fire a construction worker? I don't get the connection.
It's called the economic multiplier effect. So think about it. A nurse gets paid by medical funds. She takes that paycheck and she, buys a sandwich or pays a contractor to fix her roof. When her job disappears, all that spending just stops.
It's a ripple effect.
Exactly. For every single dollar of federal medical funds we lose, the state's economic output drops by about $1.85.
Right.
So Washington cuts $1 and California's economy shrinks by almost $2.
That is just brutal math. But H.R. 1 isn't only about the money, right? It's also changing the rules of the game for the people receiving the care.
It is. It introduces these really strict work requirements. For the first time, childless adults on Medi-Cal will have to log 80 hours a month of community engagement.
So working, school, volunteering.
Right. And I know there are listeners right now nodding their heads saying, good, people should be working. It's a pretty standard conservative principle, move people from dependency to self-sufficiency. It is. And that is the stated philosophy of the bill. But the logistical reality is just messy. The data shows that when you introduce these administrative hurdles, forcing people to log hours, submit paperwork, prove they volunteered, you end up kicking off a lot of people who are eligible.
But they just can't navigate the bureaucracy.
They can't navigate it. The Legislative Analyst's Office thinks caseloads could drop by 1.6 million people.
1.6 million people losing their coverage. And there's a specific target on immigrants in this bill, too, isn't there?
Yes. It ends full-scope coverage for about 200,000 lawfully present immigrants. We are talking about refugees, asylum seekers, trafficking survivors. They get bumped down to emergency-only services.
So if you're a trafficking survivor trying to rebuild your life in California, the feds are basically saying, unless you're dying in the ER, you're on your own.
Essentially, yes. It is a very, very sharp pivot toward austerity. And usually when the feds do this, a state like California just has to take it on the chin. You cut your own budget, you reduce services, and you move on.
But California is not known for taking things on the chin. Which brings us to the counterpunch. Initiative number 250024, the Billionaire Tax Act.
This is where things get really interesting. Faced with this $20 billion hole, the proponents of this initiative looked at that room of 200 people we talked about earlier and said, we have the money, it's just in the wrong pockets.
But they aren't trying to tax their income, right? This isn't about raising the top tax bracket on their salary or anything.
No, and that is such a critical distinction. High net worth individuals, they often don't have high incomes in the traditional sense. They don't get a W-2. Their wealth is growing in the stock market. So this initiative introduces a tax on net worth.
Okay, so explain how that works. Who gets hit?
It applies to any individual with a worldwide net worth of $1 billion or more. So if you have $999 million, you are safe. You don't pay a dime.
But once you join the 3 Comma Club...
Once you're in the club, the state wants a one-time 5% tax on your wealth.
Okay, play devil's advocate for me here. Why target net worth? Why not just close loopholes in the income tax?
Well, the argument laid out in the initiative's findings section is that the current tax code is just broken for the ultra-wealthy. It claims these billionaires pay less than 1.5% of their total wealth and taxes annually.
Wow.
Meanwhile, a firefighter or a teacher is paying a much, much higher percentage of their economic reality.
Because the firefighter pays taxes on every single paycheck. The billionaire just watches their Amazon stock go up and pays nothing until they decide to sell it.
Precisely. They're liquidity constrained on paper, but they have immense borrowing power. The initiative is trying to pierce that veil. They estimate this tax could raise enormous sums to fill that Medi-Cal gap.
And where does all that money go? Is it just a slush fund for the governor to play with?
They tried to lock that down. The money goes into a reserve fund that is legally separate from the general fund. 90% of it is earmarked for a billionaire tax health account to backfill the cuts from H.R. 1, and 10% goes to schools and food assistance.
Okay, so on paper, looks like Robin Hood. Take from the 200 richest people, give to the millions who are losing their health care. But here is where I get stuck. How do you actually do it?
Right.
If I'm worth $1 billion, I don't have $1 billion in cash sitting in a vault like Scrooge McDuck. It's in buildings, businesses, stocks.
You have hit on the single biggest technical nightmare of any wealth tax: valuation and liquidity. You can't just Venmo the state of California $50 million if all your wealth is tied up in a startup or a rocket company.
Right. I mean, if you force 200 billionaires to sell their stock all on the same day to pay this tax, wouldn't that just crash the market?
It absolutely would. It would be a complete fire sale. The authors anticipated this, though. They created a mechanism called the Optional Deferral Account, the ODA.
An ODA. That makes sense to me.
Think of it like a tab at a bar, or maybe a really aggressive line on your house. If you are cash poor but asset rich, you can sign a contract with the state. You say, I acknowledge I owe this tax, but I'm not going to pay it right now.
You defer the payment.
You defer the payment until you eventually sell the asset.
Wait, hang on. If I'm a billionaire and I opt for this pay me later contract, am I just getting an interest-free loan from the taxpayers? Because that sounds like a terrible deal for the state.
Oh, the authors saw that criticism coming a mile away. They baked in a deferral charge.
A fancy word for interest.
Basically. And it is not cheap. It's 7.5% annually.
7.5%. That's actually pretty steep. That is higher than most mortgage rates right now.
It is, and it compounds. So the tax bill grows significantly every single year you don't pay it. The idea isn't to give billionaires a break. It's to prevent that market crash we talked about. It ensures the state eventually gets its cut without nuking the economy in 2026.
Okay, so they have a plan for the stocks. But what about the people who try to hide the money? I was reading the fine print on this, and I saw a section on grantor trusts. Is this where the lawyers earn their keep?
This is the cat and mouse game of tax law. Usually, if you want to shield assets from the IRS or the state, you move them into a trust. You say, hey, I don't own that mansion or that portfolio anymore. The Smith Family Trust owns it.
I'm just a humble guest in my own home.
Exactly. But this initiative cuts right through that. It says, if you are the grantor, if you set it up and you still benefit from it, we are taxing it. It counts toward your net worth. They are trying to close all the exit doors before the billionaires can run through them.
But they left one door wide open, didn't they? Real estate.
Ah, yes. The third rail of California politics.
Explain that for the listener who isn't a California property law nerd. Why is the mansion exempt, but the stocks aren't?
Because of Proposition 13. It is the holy grail of California tax law. It strictly limits property taxes. If this wealth tax tried to, reassess the value of land and tax it at 5%, it would almost certainly be struck down in court immediately as a violation of Prop 13.
So to keep the bill legally alive, they had to give the mansions a pass.
They had to. It's a strategic exemption to avoid a constitutional crisis.
Okay, so we have the unstoppable force of federal cuts and the immovable object of a billionaire wealth tax. But let's get real for a second. When you do a reality check, is this actually going to work?
This is where we need to put on our skeptics hat, because even if this passes, the implementation is incredibly difficult, and politically, it is not a slam dunk.
Which is surprising, right? You'd think tax the billionaires would be a winning slogan in California.
Yeah.
But we saw some comments from a San Jose Spotlight article that suggest people are, frustrated.
There is a very real man-on-the-street frustration, and it's not about defending billionaires, it's about trust in government. You have people saying, stop whining about not getting handouts from the feds and live within our means.
Right, the whole cut the waste argument. One commenter specifically brought up the Housing First homelessness programs, asking, where did all that money go before we start asking for more taxes?
And that is a powerful narrative. If voters feel the state is burning money on inefficient programs, they might not support a tax grab, even if it is targeting the ultra-rich. But there is an even bigger problem, and it's one that explains why Governor Newsom, a Democrat, is acting so cautiously.
Yeah, talk to me about Newsom. He's not exactly leading the parade for this tax, is he?
No, he's definitely walking a tightrope. His budget proposal is very, very conservative. He is not proposing to backfill all the federal cuts. He's citing a $3 billion state deficit.
So why wouldn't he just embrace the billionaire tax? It solves his problem.
Because he knows the math is scary in a different way. We have to talk about the MCO tax crisis. This is a technical detail, but it is the engine under the hood of California's budget, and H.R. 1 blows it up.
I see this acronym everywhere. MCO tax. Make it simple for me.
Okay, imagine you and I go to lunch. I tell you, if you tip the waiter $10, the federal government will give us $20 back to pay for the meal.
I would tip the waiter immediately. That's free money.
Exactly. That is the game states have been playing. California taxes these managed care organizations, the insurance plans, but then uses that tax revenue to trigger federal matching funds. Then they effectively pay the plans back through higher rates. Everybody wins, except the federal treasury.
It sounds kind of like a money laundering scheme, but legal.
It was, until H.R. 1. The new bill says no more. It prohibits states from taxing Medicaid providers differently than others to game the system.
So this isn't just a budget cut. It's closing a massive loophole that California have been relying on to generate billions of dollars out of thin air.
Correct. And that creates a structural hole in the budget that is much, much harder to fix than a simple spending cut. And Newsom knows that. He knows that even if you pass the billionaire tax, you are trying to fill a bottomless pit.
Plus, there's always the risk that the billionaires just leave.
The capital flight risk. Yeah, we have to take that seriously.
I mean, Texas doesn't have a wealth tax. Florida doesn't have a wealth tax.
Exactly. Wealth is highly mobile. You can't move a skyscraper, but you can move the ownership of a company with a mouse click. If 10 or 20 of those 200 billionaires decide, you know what? Austin looks nice this time of year, and they leave before the tax hits.
California loses.
California loses big because those people also pay a huge chunk of the annual income tax that funds schools, roads, and police every single year. You risk chasing away the golden goose to get one golden egg.
So let's bring it back to the listener. Why should you care about high-level tax policy and federal austerity if you aren't on Medi-Cal and you aren't a billionaire?
Because the healthcare system is an ecosystem. You can't remove $20 billion from the system without breaking things that affect everyone.
Give me an example.
Okay, if a hospital loses 30% of its revenue because medical payments dry up, they don't just cut services for the poor, they close the trauma center. They shut down the maternity ward.
So when I break my leg skiing, the ER is closed, or the wait time is 12 hours.
Exactly. We have seen this with rural hospital closures. It affects every single person in that zip code, regardless of whether you have private insurance or not, and economically. If 200,000 people lose their jobs, that impacts the housing market, retail sales, everything.
It really feels like a perfect storm. You have a federal government demanding fiscal discipline and slashing the safety net. You have a state government desperate to maintain services but running out of tricks. And you have this controversial ballot measure that tries to solve it all by targeting the 0.00001%.
And in the middle of all that policy and math, you have millions of real people wondering if they can see a doctor next year.
It is a lot to process. But here's the final thought I want to leave everyone with. We mentioned the billionaire tax is a one-time levy for the 2026 tax year.
Right, just one time.
But the cuts from H.R. 1, those are permanent. The loophole closure.
Permanent. So, let's say we pass the tax, we seize the wealth, we plug the hole for 2026. Then what happens in 2027?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question. The money will be gone, but the cuts will still be there.
Are we just kicking the can down the road? Are we building a bridge to nowhere?
Yeah.
That is what you need to ask yourself before you vote.
It's a sobering thought.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. This is a developing story, and we will be watching it closely. Keep an eye on your ballot, keep an eye on your wallet, and we'll catch you on the next one.